Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. It looks like I'm collecting myself, but my foot just fell asleep. So, who here has been interested in understanding more about the place of Bhikkhunis in the context of the wider theravada world and Clear Mountain's orientation? Who here has been interested in Clear Mountain's orientation towards affinity groups? Okay, not as many, some. Why we aren't a dual gender community? Any? Some? Okay. So these are all the questions that I think sort of float around a little bit and we don't usually address directly because it's somewhat difficult territory to speak about skillfully. And I think as our community grows, we are maturing enough where these are important issues to kind of speak about a bit and to give some description of where Ajahn Kovilo and myself stand on some of these things and are thinking about them, and to where things become very interesting is when these beautiful Dharma principles really become embodied in reality and in a community, and how we're holding this. And the Buddha didn't teach Buddhism. Someone once asked Ajahn Sucitto what Buddhism was, and he said, Bud is awakening, and ism is everything else. And what the Buddha taught was Dhamma Vinaya. The Dhamma, these teachings, these articulations of truth and the path to realization of truth. And in the West, we love this. These teachings are profound, they're impactful, they're pristine and crystalline. It's amazing how the deeper you go into what the Buddha left us over the course of 45 years of teaching continuously throughout the Ganges River Valley, the fact that again and again, there's this recognition of truth of what he's saying. Things you knew or intuited but had never heard spoken about so clearly. And this is an immense source of joy that we underestimate, is recognizing truth. Ajahn Jayasaro makes the comment that, you never kind of read one of the passages in the canon, or at least I think almost never have, when you're like, wow, the Buddha really got that one wrong. It's just like, yes, yes, yes. And for something 2,500 years ago to be articulated in such a way, what a profound gift. I think if we really think of the arising of a Buddha in the world as perhaps the greatest event in human history, or one of them, it sounds a bit extreme. Granted, I'm biased, I'm a Buddhist monk, but the fact that a being was able to awaken to a place of a stability of heart beyond greed, hatred, and delusion, and to teach it with such clarity, and to not only that, but create an institution, the Sangha. And this is where the Vinaya comes in, these codes of conduct. An institution which has lasted 2,500 years. We're among the oldest of humanity's institutions. But the Vinaya is not as romantic and as necessarily the Dhamma is. It's much more practical. It's the precision with which we move through the world. And it's not always articulated just in the service of an individual's practice. The Buddha was thinking in terms of centuries, millennia, generations, and of huge populations. So there's rules, which seem utterly baffling to some people initially. We aren't allowed to dig as monks. And you come across that rule initially, and you think, well, that is random. And then you realize that that small rule, hidden within the 227 which we hold, is the reason why monastics haven't been able to engage in agriculture, which is the reason why we've had to remain near societies and cultures going for alms round every day, which is the reason that in the healthiest Buddhist societies, a beautiful symbiosis between the lay community and the monastic community has been allowed to develop and sustain. The monastics have been held accountable for their behavior. And when that has gone astray, when large monastic institutions have begun to form, say in Nalanda in India, although that was more due to royal patronage than agriculture, or elsewhere, the monastics become distanced from the people who they're supposed to be in communion with, and the Sangha becomes fragile. And perhaps one of the largest reasons that Buddhism was wiped out of India is this exact thing happened. So yes, you come across a rule that says we're not allowed to dig, and it seems strange. And then you realize that it's one of the things we have to credit with a lineage that goes back through the rise and fall of empires. So in tandem with these beautiful teachings we've all touched, this beautiful community, there is this need to look with precision and care to how we're cultivating it and how we're approaching different issues and bringing these things to embody them in the community. So one thing we've really been hoping to do, and these are often the questions people are afraid to ask, the elephant in the meditation hall, you know, and yet I think we can handle it and talk about it skillfully. So one thing is, for the last few years, we've really been hoping to cultivate this depth of community where people are creating groups together, getting together outside of the context of just these Saturdays. And it's been beautiful to see that finally happening. There's game nights every month now. Alejandro was just organizing a group to help bring food to people on the street. We've had a recent BIPOC group get started and an LGBT plus group, which are just so enriching. And how we're holding these is, in the Buddhist conception, at the apex of a culture is shared humanity. This fact that when it all comes down to it, in a Buddhist conception, we've all been reborn as men and women, every race, every species. There's a wonderful sutta called the Dukkata and Sukkata Sutta, where the Buddha says, when you see someone come across hard times, you should think, even I too have been reborn, experiencing just this thing, just this sort of state in the course of this long, long time. And when you come across someone in good fortune, come across good times, you should think, I too have experienced just this sort of thing in the course of this long, long time. And what a beautiful bridge to empathy. We've all been, in this conception, each other's mothers and brothers and sisters and friends and enemies and pets, I mean everything. And even if you don't believe in a multi-birth perspective, that's fine. But there's a deeper truth there that's available even to a single life perspective, which is our identities that hold us apart are only part of the picture, and they're not the deepest. When people come to a monastery in Thailand, the monks will greet them and say, welcome, brothers and sisters in birth, aging, and death. A classic theravada Buddhist uplifting greeting. But there's compassion there and real humanity. And the Buddha was so careful about the Sangha being this place beyond caste. People underestimate or forget what he was pushing up against in ancient India, in bringing together all these different threads in one institution and doing it beautifully. It was revolutionary. And there's stories of, these Khattiya class aristocrats ordaining alongside Upali of the Sakyans, just a barber. And these royalty had the barber ordained first, so that they could always hold him as senior and remember that they'd given up all these worldly labels. In Thailand, the monastery is where people come and they are just Buddhist, or not even Buddhist, they're just human together. And it's amazing to have a place in society like that where all political factions gather in one spot. This is the place where you have redeemed war criminals who ordain and are forgiven by society. It's where you had communists coming together when there was an insurgency in Thailand with factions of the royalty and the military, and they were all safe in that monastery context. There's a place in society for the apex. Longpa Sumedho talks about how when he went to England, he had dreams of a stupa, these chetties, these steeples in the Buddhist world. And this conception that at the point, the apex of a structure is a single point. And you can look towards the architecture out in modern society, and it's often flat and spread out through directionality. But where's the apex? And this is the proper place for a monastery, our spiritual Polaris. It's where we all come together. And this maps onto supramundane right view, just the Four Noble Truths. But there's also mundane right view that the Buddha holds up alongside the Four Noble Truths. And the mundane right view, there is mother, there is father, there is what is given, there's the fruits and results of good and bad actions, etc. It's about duty and the careful attending to the conditioned realm. And similarly, below this apex of shared humanity, there is identity and conditions. And acknowledging that there's a real need to enrich a community and hold space for people coming in with different conditions, different identities, different pasts. And so with Clear Mountain, the official Clear Mountain events, we will have Saturdays, Wednesdays, other events, and this is under the auspices of the monastery. We have Clear Mountain adjacent events, the Sariputta study groups, these events that we sometimes list on the website and are structured and we have some accountability for. And then we have these other basket of opening space for the wider lay community to bring forth and cultivate these enriching other opportunities and other groups, and making space for people, and I think we'll do this the last Saturday of every month, to announce in the coming month what events are being hosted. When can people come over and share brunch at your house? When can you get together and make food for those on the street? This is where we'll have really important space, I think, for groups such as the BIPOC group or LGBT+, where people who, you know, there's a quite distinct demographic at some of these gatherings, and to make space for those who have different experiences is really important and enriching to the community. So this is how we're holding it. They're two separate spheres, but we're glad that Clear Mountain as a community is being enriched by these wider self-organized lay events. And I think a question might come up then is, okay, so if, identities to be kind of held secondarily, I see you are just a bunch of monks up there, so what's that about? And when we came to the West, Ajahn Kovilo and I thought about what are we aiming for with Clear Mountain? And is there room for, where will the Bhikkhunis be? Because this is important. And when we talked to our elders who were Bhikkhunis, Ayananda Bodhi, and many others, they really noted that, well, first the Buddha really advocated having male and female communities, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, have some separation. You have a bunch of celibate monastics. It's not always easy being a celibate monastic, and that separation can be sustaining and useful in that sense. But also, the bhikkhunis we talked to really spoke about the fact that because men are often looked up to by default in society, that when you have dual gender community or monastics, monks too close to nuns in a same community, that the gaze constantly drift towards the monks, and the Bhikkhunis aren't allowed to gain a firm footing as their own community, as their own teachers. There is a shadow cast by this constant male presence. And they were very clear that the way that we should conceive ourselves of supporting and caring for this fourfold assembly, monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, was to be good friends to our Bhikkhuni sisters. That even the word of like, and I think I initially said, let us know how we can support you. And I think one of the our Bhikkhuni guides and elders said, that's a bit patronizing actually. You can just be a good friend to us. And I appreciated that. So what's been beautiful is to see that Clear Mountain is gathering this beautiful momentum, this beautiful community here in Seattle. And it will be a monk community. We will have a dwelling where Bhikkhunis can come and stay and visit. But what we were hoping and what's happened and what's been so beautiful is to watch as these Bhikkhuni communities grow around this area, and the fourfold assembly truly manifests in the Northwest in a way that I'm not sure people realize is pretty historic. We have Ayananda Bodhi in Port Townsend. We have Parayana Vihara or Pasadi Vihara in Olympia. We have Canmore Buddhist Theravada Society with Ayahimsa in Canmore. We have Sravasti Abbey in Eastern Washington. And what people don't understand is the Theravada Bhikkhuni order has been absent from the world largely for about 1,000 years. Only in the last 30 years has it started again. And I think there may only be one other place in the world right now, in Australia, where you have a convergence of the fourfold assembly like what is happening in Seattle right now. It's deeply important. So that's our hope, is to be good friends and to cultivate this wider community of the fourfold assembly in keeping with this caring ethos and in keeping with the alignment and advice of our Bhikkhuni elders. We've taken on Aya Santusika and Aya Chidananda as our Bhikkhuni advisors. We go to Ayananda Bodhi for advice very often. And for those who are wondering about the Bhikkhuni, what's kind of not very beautifully called the Bhikkhuni issue, I think actually very unbeautifully, so let's not call it that. But the place of Bhikkhunis in the wider Theravada world, this is, to begin with by saying, we can forget what a flash of brilliance and beauty and foresight it was that 2,500 years ago, in an extremely patriarchal society, the Buddha not only said in a pretty unprecedented way that women were capable of enlightenment exactly as men were, but created an order, a self-sustaining, self-governing monastic order for them. It was unprecedented. And not only that, most of full ordination can be given to monks when they're 20 years old and to nuns when they're 20. We're allowed to ordain as novices, which have slightly less rules, when we're, quote, large enough to scare a crow. So about 11 years old maybe, depending on how scary you are and how the crow is. But the Buddha made a special allowance for women married at the age of 12 and above, where they could ordain. This compassion for helping women who were put into underage marriage move into a Sangha, an institution where they were held by something different. And this Bhikkhuni lineage, created at that time, has lasted in various forms all the way to the present day and ushered innumerable beings into enlightenment. The Sangha is a quiet thread that runs through history, and I don't think we realize how different the tides of history might have been without that quiet thread of bhikkhunis and bhikkhus running through the world, through that fabric. The ripples that move out from the quiet center are hard to understand. And even, Ajahn Jayasara has this beautiful thing where he says, you've heard about these trees in the Amazon, these vast trees, and you've never seen one. But somehow knowing that there are these ancient trees in the Amazon just makes you feel better about the world. And similarly, we know there have been innumerable beings, quiet monks and nuns, practicing in caves, in huts, spreading loving kindness to all beings, to you right now, through 2,500 years and before. And isn't it just kind of comforting to know that there is another path that has been held open? This door has been held ajar for 2.5 millennia for all of us, through the rise and fall of empires. And if we get concerned about the political situation of today, about where things are going, remember that when the Maoist revolution was happening 70 years ago, something like that, there were monks and nuns who were beaten trying to make them disrobe, and they would not. And there have been monks and nuns that have outlasted famine and held these teachings for us to the present day. This Sangha has lasted far worse. This is the thread you can rely on. It is beautiful, and we owe it. There's a duty for us to carry it forward with utmost care. So the Bhikkhunis, in the theravada world, it did die out. Just the whims of society, the turbulence of flood and famine and war eventually did wipe out the order in Sri Lanka. And it continued in Korea and elsewhere, the Bhikkhuni order. But it did die off in these other places just because it was more delicate in a few ways, given the society and other forces. And recently, it was, there was debate around whether it could be revived or not. And scholars such as Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhante Analayo really said, we think it can, that in this Theravada order, an ordination just by a group of monks, seeing as the other order of Bhikkhunis required for a dual quorum were no longer available, just a quorum of monks would be enough. And or bringing in Bhikkhunis from the Korean lineage for a dual ordination. And so both were done. There was an ordination that would fulfill both requirements in Bodh Gaya at the end of last century. And this ushered into being the current resurgence and reinvigoration of the Theravada Bhikkhuni order, which we now see. And it can be frustrating in some ways how it seems like it happens so slowly. These things move. But in the context of this wider history, this is happening, and that is beautiful. The thing to note, though, is that there are other sides to this debate. And some of the elders in Thailand and elsewhere don't believe necessarily that reinitiation of ordination could be valid by Vinaya. And there are convincing arguments to be made there in certain essays that are written, bearing lots of evidence. And I think what's very significant is with the colonization of Asia by the West, 2 countries escaped being colonized, and that was Japan and Thailand. And Japan did it by closing in, and Thailand did it in classic Thai fashion. If you ask how many, Thais will take every holiday they can and celebrate them all. Thailand has this ethos of welcoming. It's the land of smiles. And that's how they largely avoided colonization, is they played all these different powers off each other. And the other way they did it is by crystallizing their identity around their Buddhism. That's what held them. That was a central thread. And so they moved through this last century where they watched the countries around them getting napalmed by the West, getting decimated, getting bled for resources. and they hold their own sovereignty. And then, but from the view of many of these elders in Thailand, the idea of bhikkhuni ordination, being able to restart that after it had died out, it seems, how could they possibly do that when the Buddha hadn't given explicit permission for that to be done? This is the thinking. And then for the West to come and tell them what they had to do with their religion after it had only just held them through these tides of history, of course there was resistance, and of course there's a different ethos there. And many of these monastics, and I only bring this up because when people learn about this issue, often it can lead to this dismissal of the other side of the debate as bigoted, as just a lot of anger and acid can come up. But it's so important to realize many of these beings, many of these monks are the most beautiful beings I have ever met. Many of them are enlightened, I think. And they do have a different view. And so how Clear Mountain situates itself in this world is by understanding the goodness that does lie behind all these different facets of Sangha, by understanding the conditions that lead to these different views. And we do believe that bhikkhuni ordination is valid and are delighted to be in communion with our bhikkhuni sisters and watching that grow. And it is growing. There's many bhikkhuni monasteries now forming in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, in the US. But we honor and care for the other elements of this Buddhist world and understand that pretty much everyone in this scene is operating as best they know how, trying to hold respect for the tradition and the Dhamma. And I think a very important metric for Ajahn Kovilo and myself, with who we draw close to, is sensing this love of harmony and feeling in the voice if any sense of acid or vinegar is coming up versus the voice that's just water, clean, sweet water. Because these things do shift, and there is a gentle but steady and powerful movement happening in the world, a steadily growing light. And we can be part of that, but we can be careful and kind as we tread that water, or tread that path. Treading water too. And the final thing I'd say is, I'm hoping I'm articulating this correctly and beautifully, because I know it's a question that comes up for people. But Clear Mountain is very uniquely situated in the Buddhist world right now. We have deep and beautiful bonds to our elders, and we have deep and beautiful our elder monks in Thailand, and we have deep and beautiful bonds to our bhikkhuni sisters. And our power as a community lies in our ability to not break either of those. We bridge a gap where we can bring these two together. That is our power. And it goes counter to the so American ethos of railing and vitriol. But it is the most powerful place we can stand right now. And it requires poise and restraint in our speech, and an understanding of conditions beyond our own, and an understanding that we are dealing with institutions and tides of history that are ancient. We are so immature as an American young culture. Every problem is the problem. It needs to be solved right now. Things are changing. And patience. So if we can hold that space as a community, a love of harmony, a bridging of gaps, we will have provided a pretty unique and unbelievable bridge between these two worlds, and that is by far the most potent place we can rest in terms of affecting a genuine healing, because there is an imbalance now. We do need, more female ordained practitioners in the world right now, and I'm hoping that continues to grow. So just to say that this institution of Sangha is ancient. And there's a conceit often articulated in Western Dharma circles that the Dharma adjusts to whichever culture it moves into. And so we have to kind of take the important stuff and get rid of the baggage. And Ajahn Jeff, in this wonderful article called Lineage of the Noble Ones, makes the case that actually what's happened is that when a potent, cohesive Sangha moves into any culture, it changes the culture. And that is true. It really ripples out. There's a potency to these forms. And I'm not saying that all Americans are going to become Buddhists, but just that there is an archetypal potency to what the Buddha created. I remember reading the biography of St. Francis, and at the end, it listed sort of his 12 pages of monastic code for the Franciscans. And the author said, you know, what an amazing document he left us with. And fair enough, we're all about, you know, ecumenical love, but the Buddha left us a document of astounding detail, a self-governing institution and lineage which has lasted so long and is so clear, and we want to hold it carefully. Longpo Munindo notes that you don't always know which rules, which forms are key. They were knocking out a wall at Chithurst once. They bought this old derelict mansion in Chithurst in England for their first monastery. And they were going to knock out this wall, so they kind of sawed into the top of the wall all the way along, just to make sure there was no supporting beam. And there was nothing. So then they knocked it out, and immediately the whole ceiling bent. And what they saw was that the beams were crosswise. So there was nothing at the top, but it was, when they knocked out the wall, they knocked out the supporting cross. And similarly, some of these rules, you don't know which ones are key, which forms are precious and instrumental. Who cares if monks dig or not, right? It's an absurd rule, but it's not. It's key. And so just to take a step back from our American conceit of the new and understand that there is a love of the old and ancient. There's a wonderful quote that we have to care for. There's a wonderful quote that if you want to learn something new, read an old book. So to say that, just bring that sense of respect and care to these forms. One of the things I love about theravada is it has teeth, it has clear articulations. And in kind of this nebulous hodgepodge of feel-good American spirituality, thank goodness we have the clarity of these teachings, which are precise and pristine. So I think if we can care for that as a community and bring real humility to it, these ancient forms that have far outlasted us, then we can be in good stead. If we speak with harmony and love and just the sense of sweet water instead of any vitriol, then we'll be in good stead. So, thank you.
Handamayang damagataya sadhu karang dadamase.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. Okay. So, we have time for some questions. Not totally sure how that one landed, but let's see. And this also is a good time for questions which you have been afraid to ask. But Jen, even if it's not that, you can also ask whatever question it was.
I had a totally different question, but I'll save it for another day, because this was a very skillful talk, and I very much appreciate it. You mentioned something towards the beginning of the talk that I found myself falling prey to, which is I met you first coming to Clear Mountain, and then Ajahn Kovalo came, and I got used to your knowledge, your humor, your personalities, your love. And when the ayahs first came, I had an aversion to it. And I don't know if it was because of getting to know the presence of the two of you, or if there was sort of that patronage. And so I think what I would offer is, when you and Ajahn Kovalo are not here and there is just an Ayah here, my focus more readily goes to them. And of course, when Ayah Ananda Bodhi came, I was like, whoa! And so I would just offer that. I appreciate this talk. Having come out of Martin Luther King and listening to his letter from Birmingham jail, and where he rails against not even the Ku Klux Klan, but the white moderate, where he says, you've asked us to have patience for too long. I worry a little bit about the patience aspect of it, but I know that you guys are skillfully supporting the Bhikkhunis, and I really appreciate that. And I guess I would just offer that if we have the opportunities for them to visit more often, and you go visit their communities, it would be beautiful. I'm stumped at the same time if there's a recognition in Buddhism of that we have lived all of these lives, male, female, pets, everything. Why there isn't an innate sense of course, Bhikkhunis. It does leave me questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I think just to speak to some of that, one is, no, we invite the Bhikkhunis. We're overly enthusiastic in our invitations, and we get, I think sometimes they're a little like, all right, we just want to practice here. So just so you know, the invitations are going out very regularly, and I think we would love to see that more. And no, we're open to going whenever that happens, and absolutely. But just so you know, those emails are going around, and monastics, we all just kind of like to stick in our spot, and sometimes it's hard to draw people out a little bit, but we do try and going there as well, I agree. And I will take note of that. And I'd say, yeah, with the multiple births, and of course, Bhikkhunis, it's not like those who don't believe in the Bhikkhuni form just dismiss female ordained practitioners. In every culture where the Bhikkhuni form had died off, a new form arose, and the monastics who don't believe that they can restart the Bhikkhuni form have pretty much to a T worked to support these other forms in ways that they feel can elevate them. So one monk in Thailand has started a community of Mechis who will actually be interviewing one of Mechi Panya's Siri next month, where they've taken on the additional rule of not using money, of going on alms round, and she's an amazing practitioner, but they put a lot of effort into cultivating those. In a monastery in England, they restarted a form called the Siladhara, which they were trying to condense a lot of the most key rules out from the Bhikkhuni form and have that. So just to say, even in these circles where they thought, we can't restart this, what can we do instead? There was always that acknowledgement. And yeah, personally, I think, having talked to Ananda Bodhi and others, they talk about the power of that lineage stretching back and how important that form is for them. So that is where we personally fall. So yes, I sort of feel all that. Yeah. Oh, sorry, someone. Yeah.
Hello. I'm noticing a version of public speaking arising. I really appreciate the talk and raising this issue. I would say I've been practicing since 2005 with increasing levels of commitment, and I would say in about 22 had a bit of a, I'll call it a faith. I found out that certain lineages didn't ordain women, and there are things about gender oppression were happening that I didn't know about, and I'm back. I love the Dhamma, this practice, and I guess I want to frame it not as the Bhikkhuni issue, but I think in grappling with that crisis, I saw that just looking at the philosophy of Buddhism, it's Dhamma, which is translated as reality. I understand the reality is that everyone's capable of enlightenment. Just looking at gender, there's no gender in the concept of non-self, anatta. There's no, if you practice with the 5 recollections, there's no aspect of gender there. A Subha practice, if you're dissecting the body that way, gender's an issue. Looking at the 5 precepts, if we're talking about practicing harm, I see a lot of harm in not ordaining women and other gender differences. And if we're practicing with speaking the truth, I think making a distinction that way is also a kind of harm, to say that.
What distinction?
Not ordaining women seems like, I guess I want to use the word almost like gaslighting, to say this person isn't as worthy is maybe, that is not practicing truthfulness. So I guess I could go on a little bit, but I have doubts about separate being equal. I respect your tradition, your decision, and I don't really trust that you have an intention of non-harm. I feel so much benefit just being in the presence of any monastic who's made such a commitment. And I feel so much benefit from this Sangha, and I feel I can't really express the gratitude I feel for all of that. So I guess I'm partly expressing just the appreciation that you're raising this issue and reframing it, perhaps, so, if you're interested.
Thank you. No, and I think you're talking to some very important discord people feel in their hearts with the beauty of this form, and then there's this thing which people we can't understand, like how can this beautiful thing coexist with this, what seems like an act of violence? And I would say this is one of the reasons I wanted to frame it this way, because I don't know anyone in the Buddhist world who's saying women aren't worthy of this. I just know monks in Thailand who just watched their country narrowly avoid getting napalmed by the very Westerners who are now telling them what to do with that religion. Say, we just had no conception you could even restart this lineage. We have a perfectly good lineage here of our own for female ordination. And and who are you to tell us what we need to do with our own religion, And that can come from a place of deep goodwill for everyone, but a very different conditioning and worldview. And I've seen that narrative be not examined by people who have a wider context over time. And I think it is really important to examine. And I do see the damage you're pointing to, absolutely. And I think that's why we're so delighted that things are shifting. But I want to honor what you're saying, because this debate taps into much deeper places of these are fissures and wounds which go back millennia, I think, with men and women, with men and women. And just thank you for holding that space in your heart with it. And and one thing is, Ajahn Kovilo and I, we really aren't scary monks. Come and talk to us about this stuff. For example, some of you might know Bhikkhunis have more rules than the men, 312 to our 227, and that, what's that about? And if you talk to us about it, you'll realize that a lot of those rules, one of them is that they're not allowed to fan us as we eat. the Buddha was putting up bulwarks for the society that was extremely patriarchal that he found himself in. A huge amount of the Bhikkhuni rules are making sure that they don't get drawn into those domestic roles. They aren't allowed to cook for people. They aren't allowed to fall into those roles. He was trying to protect them. And the Buddha never just set down rules randomly. He only set down rules when something came up that necessitated it. And what happened, if you read the Bhikkhuni Vinaya, is ancient India was a very dangerous place for women, and they were getting accosted and raped a lot. And the Buddha set up rules to protect them. So they have more rules, but it's honestly, it's out of compassion. It's not, so it's things like this where, yeah, there's like, you see an image from a distance and it just seems violent and absurd. And then we can talk about it, and you understand that the Buddha was pushing back against the caste system and gender norms in a way that is, we give him so little credit from our current standpoint of like, why didn't he just get it all perfectly, exactly the same amount of rules as we want? And like, this is 2,500 years ago. If you look at the norms in ancient Europe or India at the time, the Buddha it was an astounding act of, it was revolutionary. And all that being said, yeah, I think it's important that we have these spaces open to talk about it, because it's not just a one and done discussion. Like, this stuff needs to continue to be talked about. And Ajahn Kovilo and I are still navigating as well. Like, we value people's input. Like, if you do see us doing things which aren't respectful, if you do see us not bringing bhikkhunis as much as would be helpful or something like this, then, talk to us. We trust to navigate this community it's a community together, honestly. So I would like to actually call on Juanita if possible, Miles. I think the Thai perspective is useful here.
Namaskar, Ajahn. Thank you very much for bringing this one up. For all, the Bhikkhuni issue never come up to me is because grew up in Thailand with a Buddhist family. My two uncles is a monk. My aunt is nun. My mom became a nun after I graduated. So we think we have the right to practice Dhamma and never come up as why women cannot ordain and things like that. And then when I came here, I started to be more interested about it. And as a theravada, we have to ask ourselves why we come to interest in theravada Buddhists, because the elderly follow the rules. They want to change this thing, that, but they sacrifice themselves to follow the rule that it's not even work. It's useless in this time. They can do, like Ajahn said, they can dig the ground. But because of that, we are interested in it because the rule have very preserved, and the elderly in Thailand really. So at the moment, there is a Bhikkhuni in Olympia, and me and my Thai friend go take turn to bring the meal to them every week. We're very happy to do that. But as we see, Ajahn Kovilo, Ajahn Nisabho have been training for 5 years, for 10 years to do that. And we learn, and we know that we appreciate that he learned how to be patient, how to be conduct, how to be it all from the monastic training many days, and be humble. And it takes long time for them to become this way. So as us to have eagerly to have so quick ordained Bhikkhuni, and have to be training for many, many years to drive to be leader the Bhikkhuni community. It takes time. I really hope that we can have it, but we'd like to ask all the community to be patient, to be understanding that the elderly in Thailand understand this. They try to figure out what to boost the women community to come here too. But as the rule, as the way that they have to follow the rule and the training, conduct, and all the rule that the Buddha laid down, Kurutam 8, what is it called? Kurutam.
Oh, Garudama.
Yeah, Garudama 8 is very, very severe for the woman, hard for women to follow. And at this moment, I very appreciate both Ajahn that they have to learn themselves how to associate or relate them with the Bhikkhuni as well, because there is no example for them to work together like that before in the history of the Bhikkhuni and the Bhikkhu. So there is a rule between each other of them, and they have to really follow. Like when they each other, how to they bow each other, how to they sit, how to this is a rule that have to be considered to live in harmony and have the Sangha as the Buddha want to lay down. So I just would like all of us to be patient and understanding, and all the Sangha, the Kruba Ajahn in Thailand, they really want to help the women too, but they don't know how.
I think it deserves a sadhu for the ancient Thai lineage, which we're all blessed by, and which Juanita is speaking to. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Juanita, truly, for representing that. And I hope I spoke respectfully of our Thai lineage, because it has given me everything I have. And yeah, Juanita spoke to the rules that we have between the monks and nuns, which we're still figuring out, and that's actually it's a fun exploration. We aren't allowed to give robe cloth freely, just for nothing, to a bhikkhuni, because the Buddha wanted to avoid kind of favoritism. So usually if we give a bhikkhuni any robe cloth, we have them give us back like a bag of tea or something like that. So we're working with it in different ways. But this is a skillful conversation, people, and please continue to have it. If it's leaving a splinter in the heart at all or some bruising, feel free to talk to us about it always. But it felt like we're mature enough of a community to actually talk about this now, so it's good too. Thank you, everyone, really. Gary, I'm sorry, I don't think we have time. Unless you were just going to be like,
Well, I wanted to express appreciation for, first of all, how skillfully you're doing this, and for the fact that you are open to, in a very vulnerable way, struggling to understand something that is being recreated. And appreciate your openness.
Thank you. Thank you. And if people, the Meiji form is a powerful lineage that also exists, and the Thais have done beautiful things with, and we will have an interview with one of our favorite Meichis, Meichi Panyasiri, next month on the channel, so do tune into that. Thank you all.